Welcome councillors, members of the public and staff. I declare the meeting open at 6:45 p.m. Everyone at this meeting is reminded to conduct themselves in a polite and professional manner, keep communication factual, use appropriate language and tone, do not use any defamatory or derogatory remarks. Defamation laws apply to addresses in public forum. I also ask councillors to observe the requirements under the Code of Meeting Practice and Meeting Etiquette. I remind all present that the video recording is an official record of council and may be made available to persons upon request in accordance with the Government Information Public Access Act 2009. No other recordings are permitted. So we'll begin with an acknowledgement of country, and that is that Bayside Council acknowledges the traditional custodians, the Gadigal and Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation, and pays respect to elders past, present and emerging. The people of the Eora Nation, their spirits and ancestors will always remain with our waterways and the land, our Mother Earth. So do I have any apologies, councillors? There are no apologies or requests. I'll begin that again. There are no apologies, so we'll just move a procedural motion as we have Councillor Muscat and also Councillor Saravinovsky wishing to participate in this meeting by audio-visual link. May I have a motion that... Who moved that motion, sorry? Councillor Douglas, and seconded by Councillor Curry. All those in favour? Aye. So are there any disclosures of interest this evening?
I have a non-significant, non-pecuniary disclosure of interest for the Muddy Creek. Oh, sorry. I have a non-significant disclosure of interest for the Muddy Creek Master Plan, as I am a member of the community garden that resides there.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Are there any other disclosures?
Yes, I have one, Councillor Muscat. In regards to, I have a non-pecuniary interest with item CPE 22.033 in regards to the costing of Botany Aquatic Centre, as I'm president of the Botany RSL Swimming Club there, but I will remain in the room.
Thank you, Councillor Muscat. So we'll move on to the minutes of previous meetings. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Curry, seconded by Councillor Barlow. All those in favour? Aye. So moved. Now, items by exception. There are only 3 items on the agenda for tonight's meeting, so we will deal with all these items. There is a list of speakers addressing us tonight, so I will put forward a procedural motion that we deal with CPE 22.034, which is the housing strategy update first, and then this will be followed by item CPE 22.032, the Muddy Creek Master Plan. Do I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Curry, seconded by Councillor Barlow. So all those in favour? Aye. Carried. So members of the public who have applied to speak at the meeting are now invited to address the meeting. So we'll have our first speaker dealing with item number CPE 22.034, which is Mr. George Antonio. So he's speaking for the item. I'll just advise that speakers are advised that a warning bell will sound when only 1 minute of speaking time remains. Speakers who are joining the meeting via the Teams app are to have their video off and microphone muted until I invite you to speak. Speakers will be removed from Teams once the item has concluded. You can then watch the remainder of the meeting on Bayside Council's YouTube page. Speakers are reminded to keep communication factual, polite and professional, and to use appropriate language and tone. Do not use any defamatory or derogatory remarks. Defamation laws apply to addresses in public forum. Mr. George Antonio, would you like to begin your speech?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is George Antonio and I'm a resident of Bexley North. I disclose that I work in the property development industry, but I'm also a registered planner with the Planning Institute of Australia. I do believe my comments are unbiased, and I'll let you make that judgment based on the facts I state tonight. I'd first like to confirm that I support the officer's recommendation in principle for the nominated investigation areas. However, I wish to make a third recommendation that I believe the panel should consider to include in their final committee recommendation that will go to the next council meeting. That is, investigations for Bexley North should include assessments of, where appropriate, potential higher densities within 400 metres of the train station, with a transition to medium density up to 800 metres from the train station. I put forward this recommendation because Council is running out of land for higher densities around train stations. Let me run you through the following. Mascot, Walleye Creek and Rockdale. They've all been maxed out in terms of land use changes to promote more housing. Banksia and Carlton Station, as per this report, has been ruled out as they offer very low yields. Carlton due to the existing 3-storey walk-ups that surround the station, and Banksia with its small lot sizes and situated directly below the east-west flight path. You then have Torella, which isn't a local centre as there are no shops or amenities, and the housing strategy recommends the industrial land is to stay industrial to protect employment opportunities. You then have Kingsgrove, which is set aside due to the Cogra to Parramatta line, and no zoning changes are to take place as to not jeopardise future opportunities. You then have Cogra, which is predominantly 3-storey walk-ups and are to be protected to limit displacement of affordable housing, page 35 of the housing strategy. And then you have Arncliffe, which is capped out on the east side as it's already been zoned, and then any changes to the west were already considered by this council in last year but were not progressed. So council's left with only 2 train stations left, that being Bardwell Park and Bexley North. As a note, the Mumbai to Sydney gas pipeline passes through Bardwell Park and Bexley North, and there are questions about safety for higher densities. However, after discussing with the senior urban planners at the APA group who manages the pipeline, they've already designated the land around Bexley North and Bardwell Park as the highest residential density for pipeline operation. This means the pipeline's operations won't change if high density is built in its proximity. As a note, this pipeline passes through Walleye Creek high rise. It runs right past the Woolworths and Dan Murphy's there. It also runs past Beverly Hills train station, which is under master plan for higher densities by Georges River Council, and rezonings for higher densities at Padstow, Reesby and Panania Station by Canterbury Bankstown Council. In essence, the pipeline is merely a formality in terms of its investigation, rather than a true impediment to higher densities. The pipeline runs through many high-density areas and is operated on that basis. So with Bardwell Park and Bexley North, Bardwell Park, as listed in this report, has poor topography in terms of steep rises, and so all council has left is Bexley North. Bexley North is the last train station with surrounding land that is relatively unencumbered. Bexley North represents the last local centre undeveloped in Bayside LGA that has reliable and consistent train timetable, above average land sizes, amenities, green space, no heritage constraints, and plenty of bus movements with the 410, 420 and 491, allowing for bus travel in every 5 to 10 minutes. The other important factor is that Bayside has almost full control over the development surrounding the station at Bexley North because it's too difficult on the north side to develop due to the M5 entry and exit and steep topography. Bankstown Council doesn't recognise Bexley North for any future development potential on their land. The report before you today on the last page recommends that Bexley North may be suitable for terraces 3 to 4 storeys. I believe that this is an underdevelopment for the suburb in Bayside that is located on a train line with opportunities for providing more housing. The Bayside housing strategy has a target of 7,700 dwellings over the next 5 years and 8,100 dwellings for the next 5 years after that. If council doesn't take the opportunity to maximise development numbers near train lines, it means council will have to face the hard decision to further zoning changes away from train stations to meet housing supply numbers. If Bexley North is only investigated for smaller 3 to 4 storey dwellings, how can council in the future justify anything larger that isn't near a train station? Every other train station in the LGA, which is in an accessible location with high levels of amenity and serviceability, has lifted their weight in terms of providing housing supply, and Bexley North is no different. It's just the last one. I request the panel include the recommendation I've put forward or similar so that council staff at least take the opportunity to consider high densities in the 400-metre ring of the train station at Bexley North. The recommendation doesn't impose an obligation, it merely just gives flexibility to council staff for when the investigation time comes to consider the area for high densities that's within really a 5-minute walk or 400 metres of the train station. As a repeat of the recommendation, investigations for Bexley North should include assessment of, where appropriate, potential high densities within 400 metres of the train station with a transition to medium density up to 800 metres from the train station. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Antonio. There is an officer recommendation before us. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Curry, seconded by Councillor Barlow. May I ask for a officer summary of this report, please?
Strategic framework and an action plan in relation to housing supply, diversity and issues such as affordability. Council has met the 2016-21 and 2021 target with ease. We are on track to deliver the second target, which is from 2021 to 2026. We are required by the state government to plan for that longer term and diversity, and this is really where we're at now. So really we need to be looking for where the next 8,000 dwellings would be located. The report summarises progress to date against the adopted housing strategy, and we have completed initial investigations for a number of areas to inform the amendment to LEP 2021. And those areas were Carlton, Banksia, West Arncliffe, and I note that West Arncliffe we have a resolution to formulate a reference group, councillors. We looked at Bay Street, Rockdale Town Centre, including Wall Street, where we are amending the planning control to accommodate more housing. And in 2022, land through the back of, I suppose, of Princess Highway in Rockdale Town Centre, and we're in the early stages of that and will be coming to council. We have done a detailed investigation of Brighton and the Sands with master planning work, and we're proposing to use council resources for these three areas in order of priority. At the moment, the staff recommendation is West Cobra, so that is in support of the Cobra collaboration area and the health and education precinct there. We know that some areas of West Cobra have 4 pubs, and that's in part lower income economic status rental housing, and we're not proposing to look at those areas at this stage. We're proposing to look along Botany Road from the south of Garden. There's a mismatch in FSR, floor space ratio and height of building, and also there's some council-owned properties in that area. We need to be mindful of property issues, but we also are aware that that is in that area that is affected by the mismatch. And then further down the track, Bexley North. Key considerations for each of the investigation areas, outcomes we'd be looking for would be clearer understanding and direction for housing diversity and supply, housing affordability, making sure there's good access to public and active transport, livability and resilience targets, which is key to realising the 30-minute city, which is a primary objective of the Eastern City District Plan and Council's own resources. Documents, open space and connection to place, and obviously built form outcome.
Thank you for that summary and also for the quite detailed report. Councillors, are there any discussions or questions?
Can I just ask, so the COGRA, that's in partnership with Georges River Council, no?
No, that would be us leading that, but the health and education precinct doesn't have a lot of residential in it. So it is not inconsistent with that collaboration area, but it certainly would be something we'd be progressing ourselves to look at appropriate places for potentially updating that would accommodate more housing, which has all of those qualities that we talked about, I suppose, which is good access to public transport, good access to open space, providing well connected to employment without impacting on future opportunities really in that area.
Thank you. Councillor Werner?
Thank you. I did notice that the report mentioned affordable housing, but I was just wondering if council had thought about any mechanisms by which it can be made affordable? Or is that something for future investigation?
We are investigating one of the actions that is on council's books, I suppose, to do is a affordable housing strategy and potentially an affordable housing contributions plan, which would be inclusionary zoning. So that's something that we need to progress, and would certainly be progressing it in parallel with this sort of work.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas?
I was quite interested in the Bexley North, as particularly the paragraph that says this type of place may be suitable for terraces, 3 to 4 stories, manor houses, townhouses, multi-dwelling houses, and 3 to 4 story apartments, which would contribute to housing diversity as compared to areas identified for high-rise apartments only. I mean, we've just heard from the speaker, who I understand was a property developer. Is that correct? Can I just have that clarified?
I work for one.
You work for one. I mean, my perception of this is that the lower high-rise is actually more popular with the general community. They don't actually like big high-rises being developed, partly because they block views, they create shadows, wind tunnels. So actually, I was really excited to see that we are proposing that kind of lower level development, which I think will be much more popular with the community. And I also know in terms of sustainability that stuff is much easier. Once you get above 9 stories, it's basically impossible to service an apartment with solar. Sorry, through the chair. So I just, wanted to pull that part out in particular and just get you to expand that for us, why the decision was made to put in there, through the chair, the lower high-rise option for that area.
Chair, the housing strategy does identify typologies. There was a piece of work that was done that sits behind the housing strategy, which is a more detailed analysis of place by topography, character, opportunities for access to open space, to transport, and that really helped inform where the housing strategy the recommendations or the sort of thinking came from. So that wording has come out of that housing strategy. And so it's really about housing diversity and providing diversity that is appropriate for place as well as appropriate for the community and building on the character without, I suppose, changing it in a way that isn't consistent with its characteristics. So we've done that piece of work. The housing strategy really does start to talks to that typology, and that's where that sort of thinking's come. So it's built on an evidence base that we did for the housing strategy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morrissey.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. Firstly, with the south of Gardeners Road master plan, just for the record, I read that. So that's now extending, the review's extending all the way through to Wentworth Avenue. Is that correct?
Through your chair, the housing strategy identified the business zoned land on Botany Road, and that does extend to the other end of the shopping centre. It's really the area more to the north that we think we need to have a closer look at, but we would look at that whole zone.
So because that was my initial understanding
Yep.
when this has been discussed in past terms, that we're just looking at that northern section, but now so this will go then all the way through the mascot shopping, the original mascot shopping precinct as well.
Yep.
And with the investigations, I heard in your response there that this will be being done internally, but are other stakeholders, at what point are other stakeholders engaged? For example, Housing New South Wales. There's a well-known publican who owns something in Mascot who I know would want to be aware. But at what point do we start engaging other stakeholders? Not them specifically, but they're just two examples.
I suppose the comment in the report and in my response was really around that at the moment we'll be using staff to do the work.
Okay.
Rather than looking to get consultants. We may need to come back to council to get some budget for additional studies and additional work. In terms of engaging with the community, we'll have a community engagement plan, and we would certainly be engaging with landowners and the community to understand aspirations as well as concerns and issues that they may have. And we'll do that as we would for any project, any master plan project that we would for Garden Park.
Yeah.
We'll do it in that sort of way, in a
Just-
collaborative way.
Just for that, Chair, sorry, I think at this stage we've just flagged these areas. There's really nothing there in terms of the substance, in terms of what we might be looking to do in terms of changing planning control. So I think we would come back to council either in a workshop or with another report to give you some idea of where our thinking is going after that analysis is done, and then we would probably engage with the community once council has some level of comfort with that.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. And it was really good you did mention the probity there, because it's obviously we've just got to be completely transparent in what we're thinking and what we're doing. No problem with it, but we'll just make sure we're maintaining that, and it's good that it's actually in the report and that you've addressed that verbally as well, so thank you. And there's one part of it that is not being investigated, but it's in the report, which is the East Gardens, and I just wanted to know, I mean, it says most of it's in Randwick LGA. My interpretation of all of it is in Randwick LGA, given that it's on Maroubra Road and bordering Bayside. But how do we feed into that aside from a couple of sets of traffic lights where people cross over a road to get to our LGA? So.
Through the chair, that's really the district plan has required Bayside and Randwick Council to work together in looking at the strategic centres of East Gardens and Maroubra. So I suppose it's looking at what Randwick are proposing, but also what the connections, part of our role might be what the connections are to that increased housing. I think the housing strategy may have identified that there might be some areas for change, but it would be minimal on our side of Bonamon Road.
Yeah.
But we would certainly be coming back to council once we kick that off with Randwick. You might note that the time on that is late 2023 before Randwick are even going to be able to have any time.
Yeah, I would hope that we're not spending too much of Bayside resources considering Randwick planning controls. And I think on behalf of the community, we've got absolutely zero appetite for one single more dwelling in East Gardens anyway. And I think that's quite widely known. So it was just interesting it was there, and I'll look out for other future reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morrissey. Is Councillor Barlow?
Just a question, West Cogra. I vaguely remember you having this presented to us maybe a year ago or more. And with you've got here no heritage constraints. Depends which section you're going to do, because there's quite a few heritage listed buildings in that section between Union Street and Guinea Street. So this is only a report, and it'll come back, and hopefully it'll go to an information session so we can get down to the nitty-gritty instead of just asking questions here.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Is there any further discussion? So we'll now vote on the item. All those in favour? All those against? I declare the item carried. We'll now move on to speakers for item CPE 22.032. I'll ask Mr. Justin Simpkins to come to the stand. Justin Simpkins is speaking against the committee recommendation.
Thank you. As mentioned, my name's Justin Simpkins. I'm a member of Bayside Community Recreation Club, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the club. The club opposes the committee endorsing the plans because they do not specifically make any provision for the club. The club is recognised, aside from the public, as one of 3 key stakeholders in the area. What I'm going to address is the reasons set out in the papers as to why the club has been excluded. And ultimately, the club's position is that those reasons are not sound and the committee should not act on them. The main reason justifying the exclusion of the club from the plans, the subject of this item, is that, and this is contained on page 10 of the papers, that the club will need to vacate the site while the underground fuel tank removal and remediation occurs. And at this point, it's unknown how long this will take and the extent and scope of the works required. The club makes 3 points in relation to that. The first is that at no time has the club been consulted about any proposed removal of underground fuel tanks, which respectfully I say is extraordinary given how long the club has been at that area and its various iterations. It was not part of the community consultation or any plan that's been discussed with the club. And what I say is if it had been, Council would have realised that in my submission the removal and remediation is not necessary. Which brings me to the second point, which is that the underground fuel tank was decommissioned in 1985. At that point in time, the fuel was emptied of contents, the tank was filled with soil and all piping was removed. It's been untouched for 35 years. I'm told by those that have been in the club far longer than I that that was done with council at the time, Rockdale Council, and it was done according to Australian standards and in accordance with EPA standards. So the second point is that there's no need for any removal of remedial works. The third point is that if such works are required, there is no reason why the club could not be accommodated on an alternate site within the vicinity during any such removal works. And the decision to simply leave the club out of the plans ignores the club's long history, the work it has done and continues to do in the area, and its members' interests, the majority of which are locals. The second reason to justify the removal of the club is on page 10, and it's this paragraph in particular. In parallel, the investigation referred to above in relation to various approvals, permissibility of activities undertaken by the club and the environmental and safety performance of the site will be undertaken before consideration is given to granting the club tenure to return. That's the second reason justifying the club's exclusion from the plans. In relation to that, I say 2 things. The first is it refers to an investigation referred to above, but there is no investigation referred to above in the papers. So in my respectful submission, the committees are being asked to act on a recommendation without either full disclosure or on the basis of an incomplete document. The second point is that the club has not been consulted about any investigation or what it might entail. What I do know is that on the 26th of April of this year, Council requested by email information and details relevant to those issues, and insurance documents and other material were provided to Council. The third reason is that the report picks up on a comment we say is taken out of context about the removal of the slips, and it said that, well, the clubs have said if the slips go, then the club can't remain. That's not the position of the club. The slipways are a very important aspect of the club and what it does, but the real point the club says is that the slips don't actually need to be removed. And having regard to the above, it's submitted that the plans endorsed any plans that are endorsed by the committee should specifically make provision for the club. The basis for excluding it has not been justified. Ultimately, what the club asked for today is that any decision on this item be deferred and that council or its representatives meet with the club to discuss some of the matters that have been raised today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Simpkins. We now move on to Ms Taylor Van Dyke, Vice President of the Bay Community Garden, speaking for the committee recommendation.
Hello, I'm Taylor Van Dyke. I'm the Vice President of the Community Garden. I'm a member of BCRC. I have a strong connection with the men's shed and I love the area. I want to firstly thank Council for actually listening to the community consultation. I can see from the plans that they have changed and you know, a lot of the issues that we first raised have been addressed and I am really, really pleased to see that. So I really appreciate that. We are frustrated that it took a long time to get here. There's been quite a few master plans and this has affected a lot of our members' mental health and actual, you know, ability to want to continue to participate. We're also a little bit frustrated that we weren't notified about this meeting. We are core stakeholders in that space and, you know, we take it very seriously and obviously this is making a decision on our future. So, you know, we're very passionate about our future, obviously. And I would like to also address that at the meeting at the library, there was 12 staff and only 8 attendees. So it did end up feeling quite aggressive for me personally, being there. There was a lot going on and there was just a lot of staff and councillors and everything else. And everyone wanted to hear their voices heard, and I understand that, I appreciate that, and I'm glad for that, but us, the community, left feeling like we weren't heard. And so, we went on and had our own meeting. And I've got some photos and stuff, which is nice. So we gathered together, we talked about the plan, we talked about what we didn't like, what we did like, and what we wanted to see in the future. And I'm really pleased to see that the plan actually looks pretty similar to the one that we came up with together. And I would really, really implore Council that into the future that community consultation is ongoing, consistent with, you know, every step of the process. We'd really appreciate just knowing what's going on in the space that we've looked after for a long time. We all care about the area a lot. And speaking about the space, I'm sure you've all been there. Our community garden, it's award-winning. It's beautiful and the men's shed is magnificent. What they've been able to do there is fantastic. And BCRC, you know, they've been there for a long time and they're really, really open and welcoming. And together, united, we've really activated that space. Continuously, we have walkers going through there, kids, families, and they're always so pleased to be there and so grateful for the space that we've provided. And we don't want to see that split up. I don't want to see, you know, any of these community groups. We all have the same shared vision for community, for, you know, people-centred feelings, and, you know, we want to see that continue. And we understand that there's, you know, there's a bit of aesthetics that need to be fixed up, but we can do that. You know, we would like to do that. And we also have some further questions about this new plan and some recommendations. So I can see that the first recommendations, there's some paperwork withheld. It's just a little bit concerning for us because of all the misinformation that has happened in the past. So if we can get further clarification on that, that would be really, really great. And on the plan that you guys have, so this is page 14, so you've re-changed our community garden boundaries, which is really great, but our area actually extends a little bit further, so there's a bit of a pond and a bit of a native garden. We'd really like to see that reflected in these new plans, if that's possible. And also up the top here, where it goes to the point, there's a grassy space. and that we mow that right now. We've asked if council can mow it, and we were point blank told, no, that's your space. You need to mow it, but clearly on these plans it's not. So if we can get clarification on whether it's our job to mow that area or not mow that area, that would be great. And also the permit. So we'd like to see a longer term permit on that space so we can keep utilising it into the future. And we have assurancy. I had to say both the words at the same time, that didn't work. Yeah, so we'd like a new permit that covers that area in the space of time. We're also a little bit concerned about where the roundabout is placed. I think it'll be better a little bit further up because it's a bit of a bottleneck there and it will be quite hard for the space. And also the parking. The current plan looks like it takes away parking. So this morning I've got a photo. I was standing about where the parking ends on the bottom half, and I took a photo going up, looking towards the men's shed, and we had cars all the way along there. And that's Wednesday morning. We have all of our community groups meet on that morning. So that would be really great if we didn't lose any more parking, because we have lots of older members that it would be much harder. If they've got to walk from much further or park in other streets, it's going to be way harder to actually retain and keep them. And another thing that is not really mentioned too much is the environment. We've got some endangered ecological communities, mangroves, all that kind of thing. I would really like to know what the council is planning to do to support the environment in that area. I'm personally starting a bush care group there every fourth Friday of the month. So, you know, it would be really great if some of the planning around this could also include the environment.
Thank you, Ms Van Dyke.
Thank
I thank all the speakers for addressing us tonight. We appreciate your time coming to speak to us. So there is a officer report before us. Do I have a mover and a second? A move by Councillor Curry.
Put forward that we defer this matter. I think we've heard from some of the speakers that there is some further consultation required with BCRC and potentially the gardens and men's shed while they're there. And so that we defer it for further consultation, and that we also incorporate a councillor visit to the site, because I think it would be good for councillors to have a look at exactly what's happening on that site.
Thank you. So Councillor Barley seconded that. So that. So is there any? Sorry, General Manager.
Through the Chair, I'm just checking on our timing to be complicit with the EPA requirement on the tanks, just so that we can be sure that we're not in any way jeopardising that time frame. So I've got the Manager of City Projects here. If she could just answer that question, I think that would just help put it into perspective.
Thank you.
Through the Chair, we were notified in late 2020, so we need to undertake testing over the next 3 months to be able to then lodge the DA and do that removal works.
Thank you. So would the...
So could I suggest that there be a time frame put onto the deferral so that it's clear that everyone's expectation around when we can commence testing the site, that's understood, clearly understood by all parties?
Thanks. Yes, Councillor Werner.
Thank you. For the tanks to be removed, does that mean that the boat slips and everything like that has to be, like, does that whole area have to be vacated, or can the tanks be removed while the Bayside Community Recreation Club is still on site?
Through the Chair, the area that needs to be tested and the area where the tanks are underneath, there are some containers and equipment on that current site, which would need to be relocated.
Thank you. Councillor Kari, would you like to add a time frame to that?
Well, consultation can take place in the next month, so for the November committee.
Yeah. So there is, Councillor Souness, do you? Okay, so there is a, Councillor Douglas?
I just wondered if we are deferring the motion. Is it possible that we could get more information, a report from council staff around the changes to the tenure of the site? Because it has been a long-running site. There have been changes to the tenure and also what's permissible, as far as I could understand it from the workshop that we went to, but not all of that information is here in the document or in the confidential document, and I think it would be very helpful to have that full picture.
Through the chair, the confidential attachment contains a lot of that information. You'll see that there's a lot of that content has come from property services around the tenure, the footprint, the change to the footprint over time for both the recreation club and the community garden. I think if we do, I think it will be a productive conversation and discussion to have once everyone has had a chance to absorb the fairly detailed information that we've provided in the confidential attachment.
Thank you, General Manager. May I suggest that we save those questions potentially to the on-site meeting where we can undertake more detailed discussion?
Yeah, I just feel like there is still some key information missing from, such as why was there a recreation club there? When was the zoning changed? What actually is commercial zoning? What is a commercial slipway? What isn't a commercial slipway? What's permissible on that kind of waterway? Like, there's a lot of just basic information that we need to consider.
So if I can assist.
Make a
Councillor-
suggestion that you actually send all the questions in, email all the questions in before the site meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a
That way it's all done.
good suggestion, Councillor Barlow. So there is a new recommendation before us. We'll put this to the vote. So all those in favour? All those against? I declare the motion carried. So now we move on to item CPE 22.003, which is post-exhibition City of Botany Bay, Section 94A Contributions Plan. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Curry, seconded by Councillor Barlow. Any discussion? All those...
I had a question. So in summary, could we have a quick report from the officer and then I can ask my question? in case
Sure.
it's answered?
Are we able to have a quick officer summary of this report?
Yep, sure, Chair. So this is being reported back to Council post going on exhibition. So Council have seen this before. It's a fairly simple amendment to the Developer Contributions Plan. The Botany Aquatic Centre is in that plan already as a piece of work that the plan will part fund. The dollar figure that was put in there when the plan was written 5-6 years ago is not current. Cost escalation for construction. So this amendment is simply just to update that figure so that that a fair proportion of that project can be funded from this Developer Contributions Plan. So it's been at public exhibition. We had 92 people visit the Have Your Say page, but we actually received no submissions on it. So it's back to Council now for final endorsement to be put into place.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas?
My question was around the cost report for calculation, Appendix C, which is on page 68, which is blank. So if you do a quick subtotal of the works that are required in the area, it's about $80 million. I just wondered, considering that the Botany Aquatic Centre has more than doubled in price, do we actually have a forecast that says that we can, if we're going to pay that much, will we be able to cover all the other works proposed?
Through you, Chair, One of the challenges with contributions plans is that the contributions paid are indexed, but the cost of the works and the work schedules are not. So the amount of money that council is collecting through developer contributions does go up with inflation. There's an index applied to it, but the work schedule items and the costings against them don't. So I guess the short answer is yes. The plan has a fair bit of life left in it in terms of how long it will run, and we do believe that there'll be enough money collected to complete all the items in the work schedule. It's just that the value of the contributions is going up with inflation, but the actual costings in the plan are not. So it's really just an equalising process to update the cost of work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? So we put this item to the vote now. All those in favour?
Aye.
All those against? I declare the motion carried. And there being no further items, I declare the meeting closed at 7:31 p.m.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. Welcome to the meeting of the City Works and Assets Committee tonight. So I'll, no members of the public left here, perhaps online. I declare the meeting open at 7:35 p.m. Everyone at this meeting is reminded to conduct themselves in a polite and professional manner. like to acknowledge the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past and present. We have one apology tonight from Councillor McDougall. Someone happy to move? We accept. Moved. Councillor Jansen, seconded. Councillor Barlow. All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. Does any councillor have any disclosures of interest? No disclosures of interest. That takes us to the minutes of the previous meeting from the 14th of September 2022. Two councillors that were present at that meeting. Moved Councillor Jansen, seconded Councillor Fardell. All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. Okay, we won't move any items by exception. We have no public speakers. Takes us to the first report, the report CWA 22.029, the Sandringham Seawall and Shared Path. Can we have a overview, please?
Through you, Chair. This is an update report to advise Council on what we're spending the $1 million received from the New South Wales Severe Weather and Flooding funding. We were one of the eligible LGAs as part of the flood disaster relief, and this is one of the projects that were put forward. So the Sandringham Seawall was constructed in the 1930s along Sandringham Bay, and in recent years, due to the tidal patterns and severe weather we've incurred, it has actually breached that seawall, and the soil and sand has started to erode. So the sand levels are quite a drop now below the seawall, and in 2021 we had to close the pedestrian pathway there, and as part of the report there are some photos just showing that we've implemented a temporary path. So what we're doing now is investigating and working with an engineer to come up with solutions to construct a riprap wall, which will be rock placement similar to what's been done in other areas along the coastline, and that will provide a buffer for the waves to crash against, and we'll build a new seawall behind. There'll be a landscape buffer, and then the footpath, and then another landscape buffer to the residents.
Thank you. Are there any questions from councillors?
I have one question. I know there's issues also near Dolls Point on the way into Dolls Point when there's flooding, whenever there's storms at high tide over the footpath there, the shared path. Has council got any intention of applying?
The long-term strategy of the protection of the seawalls, we've seen over the years that there's been a lot of erosion and the sand is moving south generally, apart from where it stops moving south and starts destroying off the Sandringham Path wall. My question is, have we approached the government? We have approached the government. Have they come back to us and said, yes, we can support you down the track in replenishing the beaches, especially from Monterey south, as this erosion occurs? Because before we'll know it, 1 or 2 years will pass, and that sand will be gone again, and the waves will start undermining the pathway, the pedestrian pathway, and then eventually the Grand Parade. It's a long-term thing, but we've got to keep an eye on it, because it will happen.
Through the Chair, as part of this design we are looking at the long term to enable us to have a buffer zone where we can continue to top up with soil, but I can certainly take on notice the other question and find out.
It's not so much soil, it's more beach access, because once we start putting rocks and things down there, the beach access is gone. If you go to the bottom of Sandringham, that's where there's 4 rocks, no one can go down there. Not even fishing, no one can go there until you go all the way around the bend again. So we'll need to keep that on our radar.
Through the Chair, extensive studies have been undertaken by Manly Hydraulics and the results of those studies, which were partly funded by the state government and partly funded by council, have now been finalised and options designed. We have some preliminary information that they've provided to us. They were going to do a little bit more detail on a couple of those options, but they involve the groins, they involve some major movement of sand, reinforcing of different parts of the foreshore. They are really large projects, and we have been engaged with our local state member, talking about the idea of a multi-tiered government response to it. It's much bigger than what one council could achieve, and we believe that we need the assistance of those governments who supported the third runway, supported New South Wales ports locating in that area, and really contributing to the issues. So we'll bring, once we have that final detail, we can bring that back to council to consider those very large-scale projects to protect the foreshore.
Is that, General Manager, is that, sorry, through the chair, is that over and above that whole will the parsley report we still had some time ago?
It's
a augmenting that?
Yeah, it's actually an extension to that. So the Wolseley Woolley Parsons report was the first stage of the investigation. It then went for quite extensive simulated modelling, and then looking at interventions that could be done. So it's the extended work from that has been the basis.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, declare it carried. All right, councillors, this takes us to number 8. We have one confidential report before us for consideration. So, councillors, would you like to move into closed session to discuss the report? Yes. That is a yes. Therefore, in accordance with section 10A(4) of the Local Government Act and Council's Code of Meeting Practice, well, there are no representations. I move that Council closes the meeting to the public for the reasons outlined in the report. Is there a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Barlow. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, I declare that carried. We will now vote on the resumption of the open committee. All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. I will then declare that we reopen the committee meeting. Now you've got to give the result. Okay, thank you, councillors. The outcome of the closed session was that the recommendation has been slightly adjusted to the one that was in the published document, and that council supports in principle the donation of the artwork Faces of the Wild in situ, and council to be provided with 2 mock-up plans, one with the artwork in spaces around the Sir Joseph Banks Park for people to explore, and one of the footprint of the artwork situated in the zoo area, and include interpretive sign providing the history of the zoo in consultation with the Botany Historical Trust. Thank you very much. I now declare the meeting closed at 7:56 p.m.